Surviving the Survivor.
Carm, you are getting a taste of what I lived for many years of my life, which is breaking news. And we have some serious breaking news as it relates to the Dan Markel murder case. How are you handling this so far?
Well, 5 minutes before you picked me up to get here, I saw it on my phone. And then on the ride here, which is a short ride, we tried to see who would be the best people to interview about this.
We were hustling and bustling, and we have two of the best in 2 minutes' time. We've got Preston Scott of The Morning Show with Preston Scott on WFLA in Tallahassee, part of iHeartRadio. Preston, how are you? It's been a while since we had you on.
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for inviting me to join you.
Thanks for turning this around in 2 minutes. And go Knowles, I see your Florida State shirt. And, of course, you'll recognize the other gentleman, the great Jeremy Mutz, who is an assistant state attorney out of Tallahassee, now running his own crime practice. How long were you an assistant state attorney for, Jeremy? I was stunned at how accurate you were.
12 years, 7 months, and 10 days, but I don't really count it too detailed than that.
That's me counting the days till my kids go to college and I can have peace and quiet once again. So without further ado, we have some major news here, and it's called a Proffer sheet. It turns out that Katie Magbanua now wants to talk, and it is put forward, I believe, in what is known as a Proffer form or Proffer sheet. Jeremy, can you explain what this is?
Well, it's really just a fancy term for a meeting. You know, you're charged with a crime and or facing a crime, and you agree to meet with the prosecutor. And there could be an immunity that attaches to that. Some of those details are worked out behind the scenes outside of court filings, but it is a shock. I mean, I pictured Donna pouring herself a double after this, broke on Fancy Fiction's site, and kudos to her. And I imagine probably there's a flurry of phone calls being made in South Beach right now on some burner phones. So it's significant, but really it's just a meeting. You come in and I'm going to tell the prosecutor, this is what I know, and hope that they're going to give you some kind of a deal in return.
And Preston, this just broke a short time ago. How did you get wind of the news, and what was your initial reaction?
You broke the news. Honestly, I had not heard this until Steve, your producer, Steve Cohen, sent it to me. And as I read it, I mean, I'll be honest with you, if you don't mind, I'm almost going to ping this back to Jeremy. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I thought Katie was sentenced. So
That's correct.
I'm trying to figure out what's in it for her at this point. What can be done to either alter her sentence? Because I don't, Jeremy, you and I have been friends a long time. I had a working theory that somehow, some way, Katie's children were benefiting from her cooperation, since both Katie and their father are locked up for life. I don't know that, but that was the only logical reason I could come up with why Katie hadn't rolled on the Adelson family and Charlie in particular at this point. So if she's already been sentenced, what does she gain other than maybe her own sense of justice?
I think the main thing she's trying to gain is getting out of that life sentence. And I don't think your theory is wrong. I think, but perhaps that's already been set in motion. If they put money in an account for those kids, it's in the account and probably can't be touched, can't be revoked by the Adelsons. And I think her fear of Charlie is probably greatly diminished with him being in jail now. And she can go back and revisit and say, you know what, I rolled the dice on this and now I've got life. What do I have to lose? I'm going to try to talk and see if I can work out a deal. I mean, it is very unusual. Most cases they're sentenced and that's it. But it's not completely unheard of to have a case re-sentenced or a sentence set aside. Obviously, there is some agreement of the state in this. There's some interest by the state because this order signed by Judge Wheeler wouldn't have happened if it weren't for the state attorney's office at least being okay with it and wanting to explore it. So I think she's just hoping to get out of that life sentence. And I think the ship has sailed in terms of what's being done for the kids or or maybe the Adelsons didn't do what they said they were going to do, the kids.
And Jeremy, I just want to hop in here. So this is obviously a formal legal document. And by the way, I was in touch with Ruth Markel briefly, who I think is as shocked as anyone about this. And it's having obviously a ripple effect through the Dan Markel world, that we are getting word of this potential deal. At least they're going to be speaking. Katie Magbanua and her attorney Tara Kouas will be speaking to prosecutors.
Is her attorney still Tara Kouas?
As far as I know, it is still Tara Kouas. And so the document says at the top, just for people listening, so you get a sense, order to transport. And it says, this cause having come on for consideration and it appearing to the court that the above witness, obviously meaning Katie Magbanua, is presently incarcerated at Department of Corrections, Florida, and the court desires her presence for a proffer, another word for an offer in the above case, and the court being otherwise fully advised in the premises, it is hereby, this is the important part, ordered and adjudged that the sheriff of Leon County, Florida, shall receive from Department of Corrections said Catherine D. Magbanua with her Department of Corrections number to be transported to Leon County State Attorney's Office for a proffer on or before November 28th through November 30th, 2022. So that is just in a couple of weeks' time, I believe. Upon completion of the proffer in this cause, the said defendant can be transported back to the Department of Corrections in Florida. It's dated and signed, etc. Anything that stands out to you about this, Jeremy? This is just standard legal protocol, I take it?
It's pretty standard. You know, she's in state custody. The sheriff is a county official, so this order is just necessary to arrange that travel. But it tells us nothing about, you know, what she is going to say or how significant. It tells us nothing about the state's intent here, because they may listen to this. They may feel like, you know, we have almost a duty to listen to what she's going to say, but they may say, you know what, we've got a good case against Charlie. We're just going to go forward with him and try him. Can you guess what they might do? I mean, a lot of people were surprised they made such a deal with Mr. Rivera. A lot of people were surprised they made such a deal in the Winchester case with Mike Williams. So they may make a deal to try to lessen the risks of going to trial. But we can only speculate at that right now.
I want to get back to the Winchester point in a minute, because some of these cases parallel each other. But Carmel, you have a question?
No, are there cases where the person who was already judged, they don't allow this person to testify? Or is it something that automatically everybody who wants to speak is permitted? Good question, Carm. So I think she's asking, are all defendants immediately granted this proffer if they come forward, or it's a case by case basis? Yes.
I think that's a very good question. And I think it hits on a couple of things. It's very rare for this to happen. It's very rare for somebody to come forward and want to do this or even think of this. And it's very rare for that it would happen. And even more rare for a sentence possibly to be set aside. But it's not something that has never happened. And there are cases where very bad people are turning state's evidence. And, you know, you look at certain mafia cases and things like that, where very bad people who've done very bad things, have been convicted, become a witness. And in a case like this, there would certainly be some kind of plea and cooperation type agreement. There'd be some sort of an agreement that she testifies and cooperates. Then they might put resentencing off until after the trial or trials are over with, to guarantee or give the state some assurances that once she testifies, you know, they will have something in place to actually resentence her and hold her to it.
I realize that you gentlemen are most gracious that you came on a very, very short notice, since we heard about this about a half hour before we started our podcast. So I just want to ask one more question, and then I will not say another word. Did you say
She's lying about that part. Go on.
But doesn't matter. Did you say that one of the possibilities was that she was afraid from Charlie before he became before he was jailed? That she was afraid, like physically afraid of him? Did you mention something like that?
Preston?
Not Preston.
Jeremy.
That was
Jeremy.
something Jeremy had mentioned as I talked about the scenario.
Yeah, in passing, you mentioned it in passing.
I do think that could be a legitimate, a sincere belief on her part. It could also be something that she may have to fall into to sort of rehabilitate her credibility, because, you know, Charlie's lawyers are obviously going to try to impeach her if she should testify. Say, you know, you've said this, you've denied all these things, you gave us one story before. Now you're coming in and saying you were involved, you know all these details. One of the things that she could fall back on and say, well, I was afraid of him. Well, as long as he was out, he could get to me. I feel safer now that he has been charged and he's been in custody. So I think there's a legitimate possibility she would say that. Also, just a way of getting her credibility back if the state should elect to use her as a witness.
And Preston, to you, I mean, we went through, you know, 2 trials with Katie. Again, I mean, I think you mentioned this a little bit off the top, but how surprised are you that now, after 2 trials, she suddenly appears to be, you know, doing a 180, if not more, in terms of kind of turning and now wanting to speak? Is that shocking, which is a cliche news, but is it shocking to you?
It's remarkably so. He, you know, when Jeremy talks about the unusual nature of this, he speaks from a level of experience that I don't come anywhere near. I'm an observer of this stuff, as you are. For me, though, after all the pain that she went through, to suggest that, you know, she had no part in it and that this was just something that, you know, she didn't play a role in and would not implicate Charlie at all, to now go here. That's why I keep going back to, it's either a sense of I'm sitting here and will be for the rest of my life, and the people that are largely responsible are not being touched. Or, as we've talked about, there's something gone wrong with the arrangement with the kids, or the kids are, that's now done, and this sense of justice has risen up in her. But I'll tell you what, one thing that I think Jeremy would agree with me on, if the story is as we believe it, that the Adelsons arranged this entire thing and Katie is in fact the go-between, Katie is in a position to validate and verify every single word that was recorded in those taps, in the video recordings at the 2 different restaurants. She can absolutely turn this into a slam dunk case. And I guess I would be curious to know, does the state have any reason to not want to just follow this through to its conclusion? Or is there any reason to accept any plea deal from Charlie or the Adelson family at this point?
Jeremy, you want to address that?
I think it's very powerful just for that part of it alone. But she really connects all of the strings between the dots on this. I mean, we kind of have the dots, but she's going to connect the strings. And at that point, I think it's impossible for the state attorney's office not to charge Donna and Wendi and even Harvey if the evidence is there. You know, it's certainly there as to Donna. It's certainly there as to Charlie. I don't know all the details that Georgia Capitalman knows in terms of what they have on Harvey and Wendi. But to not go after Donna as well with this additional witness, I mean, I think it's impossible for them to defend that. People change their story in a courtroom setting all the time. I mean, this is an unusual case, and this is just another example of Florida cases are just often wacky. I mean, the strangest, most unbelievable cases are often Florida homicide cases. So, I mean, this is just kind of icing on the cake of how weird this case, the many twists and turns of this. But people change their stories a lot in the courtroom settings. I mean, look at how many victims recant. Look at how many people confess to a crime and then they go to trial saying, oh, that was a false confession. I didn't do this. So the fact that she would drastically change her story, I think is something the state can still work with. And I've heard other commentators say that, no, there's no way she could be a witness. She's toast. Her credibility is toast. You never say never in a case. And
but Jeremy, doesn't the existence of all those tape recordings and videotape give the state attorney's office the opportunity to, in essence, Katie can rehabilitate herself by simply corroborating and making clear what was said. She was there. She knows what was said and what the code was and what they were really saying. She has the opportunity, because that tape is something that a lot of other people in this same setting, they don't have FBI recordings. They don't have that stuff.
Georgia, I thought, did a tremendous job of doing that with Mr. Rivera. She corroborated his testimony with all the other matching pieces that fit what he said and backed up what he said. It's even easier to do it with Ms. Magbanua, as you suggest, because not only is it just putting the pieces of the puzzle together, the jurors are going to hear those recordings, as you mentioned, and they corroborate what she's saying, and she can fill in what the even enhanced audio can't give us. She was right there at that table. So I think her ability to testify should not be minimized or diminished for that reason. I mean, obviously, they're going to impeach her. If I were defending Charlie, I would certainly point out the mercenary interest that she now has. She's trying to save herself from a life sentence. But I think the fear component, I think the fact that she now has less reasons to fear, I think would help to rehabilitate her. And I think that, the big fact of this, the injustice of this, she can certainly say, I'm doing life, I'm facing life, I was sentenced to it. And here are the other people involved, they've got nothing. So that's why I'm doing this.
And Preston, alluded to the fact that there's a lot of conjecture, which is what, we all do. We're quarterbacking this from the sidelines. Jeremy, you're a higher being than us in that you're an actual attorney and you were a former assistant state attorney in Tallahassee. But Preston,
some people might say the reverse. They might say, crazy. Only crazy people would do what I do,
That's true. Not me though. But we only know what we know, right? And we've heard the obviously the famous Dolce Vita tape, the Matsuri tape, but it could be a situation where, and this again is all hypothetical, but where she could come forward and say, I was at the dinner table with the Adelsons, with all the Adelsons, and we discussed this in depth. Let's just go with that for a moment. How, as her attorney and as a prosecutor, do you deal with that credibility issue coming off of these two trials where nothing was said prior to this? How do you deal with that?
Well, I think there are some things that go in her favor. She's not the actual one to pull the trigger and commit a heinous crime directly. So, I mean, there are worse people that testify. There are people who've done worse things that have testified. So I think that you can use her for her strong points. She could fill in some of those conversations, like what they had when they came back and did the exchange of money, or when they were meeting up together before the crime was committed, then after they all met together. What was said in that? We don't have text messages of what was said in that. We don't have recordings of that. She can fill in those gaps and say, yes, we did meet, and yes, we did say these things. She could fill in things like, when she was texted, it's over, it's been done. Yes, I know. Okay, well, how did you know that? And she could fill in those, big pieces of this case for the jury. And I think it's not going to be insurmountable, the fact that she told a different story before. I think the state can deal with that just the way they dealt with Rivera being a Latin King, main guy, Latin King in his area.
Carm, I hear you wanting to say something. I don't know if you're breathing heavy or if you actually have something to say.
No, and you always wait until I think of something else and I lose what I was going to say then. But what I think is happening here, that there is so much material and so many conversations and so much interaction. How many years after the actual act are there when they have to sit on it and not talk about it? How many years? What year did she go into jail?
She's been in, Preston, clarify that for me, but I think she went on trial first time in 2019, I want to say.
I believe so. Yeah. It's several years
Okay.
after the crime was committed.
Yeah.
So that my point is that there must have been so many conversations and phone calls and contacts and what we don't know yet because it wasn't revealed. And if she starts to work on that material, it will take months for her to unwrap all the things.
When you say she starts to work on that material, who are you speaking of?
Of Katie telling the story, working on the material.
Well, it's interesting, Carm, that you bring that up because it leads into what I was going to ask of Jeremy. Jeremy, right now, what's going on behind the scenes? And by the way, I've been on my phone nonstop during this because I'm trying to confirm some stuff.
Tara
Kawas is, in fact, Katie's defense attorney still, and she's working on this. I was able to confirm that during this short period of time. But what's going on behind the scenes right now between the defense, Tara Kawas's team, and the state, Georgia Kaplan's team? How is that playing out?
Well, they've obviously had some contacts, whether it be by phone or email, to set this in motion. And how much detail is involved in that, we can't really say, but certainly a skilled attorney like Ms. Kawas would have probably picked up the phone and talked to Georgia and said, hey, my clients want to sit down with you, and we realize you can't promise anything right now, but she's got, some information that can be useful to you. And it's at least gone that far, whether she throws in some details with that, it depends. It depends on what their relationship is. If you have a good working relationship with a prosecutor and defense attorney, they may talk about it in depth. It may be much more limited and succinct than that. But, I'm sure both sides are looking very hard at the evidence. I'm sure the prosecutor's office is quite busy right now with the 55,000 pages of records that we've heard about. Looking for more. I'm sure there's probably, if this goes to trial against Charlie as scheduled, there'll probably be some things we haven't seen yet. So I'm sure they're working very hard. Ms. Kaplan, Ms. Dugan, and whomever else they may have working with them at this point.
And Preston, you're wearing your Florida State Knowles shirt. It's a small community up there in Tallahassee. This is big news. I mean, how big is it? I mean, how does this ripple through Tallahassee, word about this and potentially changing the face of this case?
Well, it's not only a state capital, as you mentioned. This is a college town. Tallahassee is not the prototypical Florida that people think about. It's North Florida. It's South Georgia. It's pine trees and live oaks and canopy roads and hills. We might not be far from a beach, but it's not the beach. And everything revolves around the universities, whether it's Florida State, Florida A&M, and then of course the state government. Dan Markel was part of the Florida State community. It was a massive story, and everybody in this community believed that it was an arranged hit when it happened. There was nothing else that made sense. When they so dutifully and unbelievably put the case together, and you saw the pieces come into place, to me, it's Occam's razor 101. If you wanted to teach a college course on Occam's razor, this is it. This is the most logical conclusion. There was no reason for these guys to end up in Tallahassee killing Dan Markel. None. There isn't any. And I think that, this development is so massively huge because I think most human beings want there to be justice. Whether it's people that are important and powerful and in positions of authority, or whether it's the person that just is down on their luck, but they made terrible choices, we believe inherently as humans in justice. And I think that, to the point of the title of your podcast, it's why there's still interest to this day in the Holocaust. It's why there's still interest in this day to seeing the people that were responsible for those atrocities held accountable for those decisions, no matter how old they are. And in this case, Katie is going to be in a position, we've talked about the rehabilitation of her. Think of the other issues that we haven't touched on, her employment. She's going to be able to answer questions about her employment, working for the Adelson practice and how she was paid and what she was paid for. She's going to be able to bring in credibility to explain things that we don't know because we don't have recordings of. She'll be able to explain it. And it's going to give her credibility for everything else she says, because she's going to be corroborating so many things and everything's going to fit. That's my prediction. Everything's going to fit.
Amen to getting justice. Carm, your hand is raised. I expect a short, pithy question.
Not to play the opposite team from you, Preston, but I think there is also a possibility that it will end up without the results. This whole thing with Katie will end up without the results we hope for. In other words, that nothing comes from this.
Is there that possibility, Jeremy, that this is just a big false hope potentially?
Oh, very much so. I mean, she could talk to the prosecutors and not really give up anything. And it's kind of like that past meeting that they had. Maybe it'll go a little further than that, but it's not something that helps. She's still trying to have it both ways of not really implicating the Adelsons too much, but trying to get herself a better sentence. Or the state may decide ultimately not to use it. They may feel like they have enough, and they may not want to open up the case again. There's the number one thing for prosecutors is they like finality. They don't want to open up cases because they feel like if I open up one, how many other people are going to come forward and say, you know what, I got sentenced to 25 years in a drug case 5 years ago, but I can give up the drug dealers in Crawfordville. How about, let me come in and talk to you? They don't want those floodgates opened. And, the likelihood of that really is low. This is a very, very unusual situation here.
Is there any
there's a chance.
Is there any sort of threshold for, let's say, the defense to hear something from their client that is enough for them to go forward with this proffer, or is it just a gut instinct from a defense attorney saying, well, I think we have enough to make this offer now?
They really lose credibility if they would come forward and it not live up and they don't have the goods. But that's an individual calculation. A client may tell me something that we think, personally, I've had cases like that, and not as serious as this by any measure, but a drug case. And I've, gone to the state and say, hey, my guy has something here I think may help you, may be interesting to you. But I have to have some good faith basis that they know something that could be useful. I don't want to waste their time. I'm sure Ms. Kwas doesn't want to waste Ms. Kappelman's time. Ultimately, that doesn't help her reputation at all. So I think she's probably screened this, and she's got the goods to talk to Georgia about.
So it's implicitly stated that she's bringing something to the table. Carm, you are chomping at the bit today, Carm. You're like a fish out of water. I can't keep you under control.
I lied today. I have to confess. I said I wouldn't talk anymore, and I talked.
So what's on your mind now, Carm?
With the latest? No, I don't have any more.
I thought you had a question there, Carm. So let me read an email to you guys that I got. I got, what is it, Carm?
I like to murky the water. When things are complicated already, I add a little more. Now, I'm opening a parenthesis about Sigfredo Garcia. He, after he was condemned already for a lifetime in prison, he started to write to the judge. And since Katie Magbanua is in a common law marriage with him, and since they have children together, I wonder if they coordinate, and I wonder if she's trying to save his skin too.
I think that's certainly possible.
Preston, what are your thoughts on that?
I think I might. I mean, Jeremy knows from a technical legal perspective the possibility of that. Sigfredo Garcia pulled the trigger. That's, to me, that is done. I don't think Garcia is a consideration in this one bit. I think that this is all about Katie trying to find a way to lessen her own sentence, but I'm not ruling out her sense of rage that they're sitting in prison for the rest of their lives, with except for obviously Rivera, and that the Adelsons are not. But let's not forget, before this proffer came out today, or whenever it originated, the state of Florida had a case and has a case against Charlie Adelson, and have hinted that they have a case against Donna Adelson, and have slightly hinted they might have a case against Wendi Adelson. So regardless of what comes out of this back and forth with Katie Magbanua, there is a case against Charlie Adelson. And I think all of us have seen enough to believe that they have a substantial case against Charlie Adelson.
I reached out to the rabbi, as I now call him as of this moment, and that is John Singer, who's a well-respected, well-renowned attorney who's been on our show many a time. And I asked him, what he thought about this, and this is what he has to say. And I'd like to get both your guys' reaction, Jeremy first, after hearing this. John Singer says, in regards to Katie, she's not getting a better deal at this point after two trials and no credibility and taxpayer money spent. But I am curious as to what she has, ! Jeremy, your thoughts?
Well, I think she has quite a lot, and I share that curiosity. I would disagree. I think the track record of the state attorney's office is such that they would consider giving a deal to her, if you will. You almost have to go back to the beginning. I think they should have made the arrests of Charlie and Donna back in 2016 or 2017. So I don't think we should have ever found ourselves in the position that we're in now. But now that we are, I can't fault the state from having the conversation and doing the proffer, because, you do need to explore somebody that's going to cooperate and give you A, B, C, D, E, and F, and G, which I think she could give. And then you have to make a decision. And it's easy to armchair quarterback the decision because these are very tough cases. There's, you're talking about a case with 50, 60,000 pages of document evidence. And, when they did the bond hearing, Georgia mentioned 10 or 12 CDs worth of evidence. It's a complex thing. You never know what's going to happen in a trial. You can never bet on what a jury is going to do. So that if they can get justice for the family toward Donna, Charlie, maybe others, and they have to use Katie Magbanua and maybe reduce her sentence down to 20 years, is that a fair price to pay? It remains to be seen. And when it's all said and done, people will write about it probably and analyze it, more cogently than I'm doing. But I would say, really, if we had charged everybody back in 2016 or 17, I think the dominoes would have fallen. We wouldn't need to have used Katie. We may have used her in the beginning and not had to use Mr. Rivera, and it might have been a much better process without the victim's family having to wait, 8 years for justice in the case. but that's, water under the bridge, I guess.
And Preston, to you, again, Singer says she's not getting a better deal at this point after 2 trials and no credibility and taxpayer money spent, but she is curious as to what she has. Your reaction to what he has to say?
I probably agree with Jeremy on this. I think that there is a likelihood, if there's usable information, that clinches their case beyond all reasonable doubt, and then some. And if they're able to fill in other gaps to enhance the case further, I mean, I personally, I think that bagging the people that orchestrated this versus the person in the middle is far more important to me as a Floridian. It wouldn't trouble me for Katie Magbanua to get 20 years if it leads to the conviction of the people that actually came up with the plan and financed it. And then we got the people that committed the actual murder. I'm good with that. And I think most people would agree.
Yeah.
And Preston, what do you think? What kind of day do you think the Adelsons are having today? And I don't mean Charlie. I mean Donna, Wendi, Harvey. What do you think their day is like all of a sudden?
I think they said an expletive pretty quickly.
Jeremy, your thoughts? What are they? What's going through their mind right now?
I think they're pouring some heavy drinks right now, and they're not lemonade like I'm drinking right now.
They're probably thinking of every single word they ever said to Katie Magbanua right now, right? They're going back, pouring through those conversations mentally, trying to recall what they said. And if there was a big meeting, hypothetically, right now they are not. It's not sitting well for them, I assume, right, Jeremy?
They can't be unconcerned or unaffected by this. And from what I've seen about Harvey's personality, this stuff rattled him. Whether or not he was kept completely in the dark or just partially, all those conversations that came out, they said they pretty much had to dance around him knowing because he's going to get upset. I mean, imagine the heart palpitations he's going to have this, and Donna, I mean, you could see her you could almost hear her, Wendi, get that bottle out, that I put up. And it's, and sometimes justice has a way of coming around and, making them sweat. And they probably deserve to sweat a little bit today.
In a weird way, I don't know. I feel like, and this is just my own take, I would feel more at ease knowing I was caught and I'm in prison already than that someone is just perpetually coming after me. That sort of unease would not sit well, but I'm not the bravest guy in the world, Carm.
Let me ask you to that point. Yeah. Wouldn't it make a pretty big difference how you react to whether someone's perpetually coming after you or not, based on whether you did it or not?
Yeah, 100%.
I mean, if you're not guilty of something, I mean, I'll be honest with you. I have a lot of people that don't like anything I have to say on my radio program. I'm okay with that. I mean, that's what I do for a living. And Jeremy's prosecuted cases that he might have won or lost, but he knows what the truth is, regardless of what the verdict is. And he sleeps knowing he knows the truth.
Well, that's why Jeremy just said they deserve to sweat. Go ahead, Jeremy.
And there have been cases that people have escaped from custody or gone on the lam for years, and they're in the clear, but they go and turn themselves in because they tell people, I'm just so tired of looking over my shoulder and waiting for the next shoe to drop. And law enforcement is thinking in the back of their mind, well, nobody's been looking at this case for 20 years. You were in the clear, but it bothers them so much. And, looking at Wendi, her appearance in court in the last trial, I mean, it's aged her. I think it's taken a toll on her. And I think these horrible things have a way of doing that to people. They may get away with it on the outside, but on the inside, it eats away at a person. And I'm sure it is today, if not throughout the events of this year.
Carm, this is making my literally making my palms sweat thinking about what they are going through, which they deserve. They deserve holy hell. What do you think, Carm, as a therapist?
I tell you right now.
You're going to tell me something crazy like they're not thinking about it.
I don't think they're drinking. I think they are talking to their attorneys
and popping Xanaxes.
And exactly. That's the Jewish way. That's the Jewish way.
Yeah.
A more modern
Jeremy?
way, probably a more modern way also.
But what way?
More
I wanna
modern.
advance one other.
Go ahead,
I'm
Preston.
sorry, I wanna advance one other group that I think we ought to be talked about, and that's Dan Markel's sons.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're facing the. Think about this for a second. They've had their name changed. They've been cut off from their dad's family completely. By all accounts, they've been cut off from a lot of other things as well. And there's a possibility that everybody except one uncle who's estranged from the family are all going to end up in prison for the murder of their dad. My heart breaks for those boys.
As it should. I mean, they are the biggest victims in this case, obviously, aside from Dan himself, who lost his life. But I can't imagine what it's like for those kids. And I can tell you firsthand, being here in South Florida, that we have people in common, and I'm hearing things that is not easy on these kids already with the things that they're dealing with in life, being associated with the Adelson family. They are already being ostracized from what I'm hearing to some extent in the community down here because of that. So they are, as they say in the war, they are collateral damage, and they are the true victims. Hopefully Ruth and Phil and Shelly can get in there and help those boys out. Very last thing, just to wrap it up, I appreciate you guys hopping on. Carm, you did excellently in the news business. Preston will know this. There is a term when there is breaking news that will come in your ear as you're speaking, and they will say vamp, and that means to just talk and talk and talk until they're ready to go to the next person. And we were talking about substance, Carm. I'm proud of you. The only thing that you and I are going to work on off camera is to take you from Anderson Cooper to a Preston Scott. Anderson Cooper takes 19 news cycles to get his questions out. You got a pro like Preston Scott, and he's just boom on the button.
All right, I'll watch.
Anderson's in there because he's a Vanderbilt. Last thing, real quick, Jeremy. The hearing is now going to be between the 28th and the 30th. There was supposed to be a case hearing, if my dates are correct, and I apologize if they're not, on December 2nd. Does that mess up the case hearing dates now? And how will this play out between the 28th and the 30th? Does Katie just get driven to the state's attorney's office? They sit in the office, they talk, and then she gets taken right back.
One important question.
Yes.
Will these hearings will be closed door, right?
Closed door, like a deposition style, correct, Jeremy?
Right.
Who should we bribe to leave?
No, so Jeremy, tell us how this plays out real quickly, and what it does for the case moving forward. Does it delay everything?
Yeah, it's as simple as that. They drive her to the Young County Courthouse, the state attorney's office on the 4th floor. They have a big conference room. And that's generally where they do these things. They'd sit around a table, and it'd be like a deposition type interview. But if something happens where they are going to use her testimony, I would look for that to delay the trial and push that back.
Jeremy, will they have any indication what Katie is going to say before she says it? Will her attorney have advanced, this is the type of thing we're going to be discussing?
It's possible. It really just depends on the relationship between Ms. Kawas and Ms. Gappelman. If they work well together, I could very well see them saying, this is what I think my client's going to tell you, and it's going to be good. And, here's what to expect, kind of like a coming attractions. It could very well be happening like that.
Gentlemen, as Carmelo would say, you're both gentlemen and a scholar. I don't know how to say that in the plural form, but anyway, you get the idea. I cannot thank you enough for coming on last second. Preston Scott, he's got the morning show with Preston Scott on WFLA in Tallahassee on the iHeartRadio network. And Jeremy Mutz, just remind everyone the name of your law firm. I think it is the Jeremy Mutz Law Firm, but
I'm over to the west of Hiawassee Springs, out here in the central part of North Florida, law office of Jeremy Mutz.
Can't forget that. I love Jeremy, man. He's very soft-spoken, southern, deliberate, smart smart and sharp as a tack. So thank you. Same to you, Preston. This has been a special breaking news edition of Surviving the Survivor, Katie Magbanua, to talk to the state next week.
The news broke only an hour ago.
Love you, America.